Okay, so this is Boston Listening Tree, and this is Stacey. Okay, so were you born around Boston?
No, I was born in Grimsby. I moved to Boston area 2009, I think it was. 2008. No, 2008.
So how old were you when you moved to Boston?
I can't think how old I am now. 29 now. So I would have been 22, 22, I think I was, when I moved over here.
So what brought you to Boston?
My husband. Met my husband whilst I was at university. He was at university. I met him whilst I was at university. Around the time I was doing my dissertation, and I didn't really fancy living back home with my mum and dad. Just, it was quite nice to just have my freedom. I enjoyed it, so it was kind of very, very quickly. Shall we move in? He was living in Boston. Oh, you dropped him. Yeah, he would just moved into Boston after living a bit more out onto the fens and so on, and I moved in with him.
So is your husband from here?
Yeah, he's originally from New York, and he's always lived around here. He's worked in Boston ever since he has worked. So yeah, he's originally from here.
So he wanted to come back here, but you didn't want to go back to Grimsby.
Yeah, he wanted to stay here. He's very a homeboy. He doesn't like going on holiday because he likes to be at home. And if he does go on holiday, he wants to take his chickens with him and his guinea pigs. So. Bless him.
So how was Boston different for you coming from Grimsby? What did you notice about it?
I liked Boston because I just thought it was such a beautiful town. You know, I remember the first time I went into Boston and I went down Horncastle Road, and you got the river and you got the windmill and so on. Yeah, it's Horncastle Road. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And I just thought it's such a beautiful town. You go into the market square and you look up at all, above the shops, above the signage and the beautiful architecture. And I just felt it was just such a nice, beautiful looking town, really beautiful. And it just felt different to Grimsby because it just felt smaller. And I think when you know somewhere, you start to see the flaws of places. And I definitely saw the flaws of Grimsby at the time. And I wanted to be somewhere new. I didn't want to be home. Yeah, we originally moved down Rosebery Avenue. I went to live where my boyfriend was living at the time, now my husband. And we stayed there, and where did I have a job? I didn't have a job at the time. No, I was working in Ingham House at the time, I think. No, I didn't. I didn't have a job at the time. I just finished university and decided to have a year out, the summer out. And then I then went to university to do my PGCE, my postgrad, at Leicester, and I got a student accommodation there. Didn't stay there. Stayed there for a week and commuted from here to Leicester every day. And then we then moved in with his mum and dad in New York for a little while, and stayed there. Then we moved over to South Carolina, Sleaford, and we stayed there until just over 4 years ago. We stayed there till, and I then found a job. I was doing supply teaching around Boston in various primary schools, and found a job at a lovely little rural primary school who then kept me on, and it was lovely, just a lovely little school, and stayed there.
So how was supply teaching in Boston compared to when you had finally had a permanent place?
I loved supply teaching. I loved seeing the different schools. I mean, I went into schools like in the centre of Boston, and I went into schools, surrounding Boston, the villages surrounding, and also in other towns. I remember doing a couple in Spalding Way, and sort of Hull Beach Way as well. And yeah, it was lovely in Boston. I think that there was quite a few challenges sort of creeping up throughout my career teaching in Boston at that school. There were challenges popping up with larger class sizes and things like that. But it's just one of the challenges that everyone gets in a job, don't they? There's something thrown in there.
So would you say those challenges were unique to Boston? Would you say that was just the education system and that was, it wasn't actually a unique thing to Boston? Or do you think it was?
I don't think it was necessarily unique to Boston, but I think it was kind of with immigration coming in. I think it was because we had a high volume when at one point we had a high volume, and they were started to move the children out of the towns in the centre of the children from the centre of Boston, the primary schools there, and started to move them out to the villages and using buses. And the same with like lots of children, they started to bus them in and taxi children to the outskirts of Boston. And we were finding, we were on the outskirts of Boston, we were finding a lot of the children lived literally in the centre of Boston because there were no spaces for their nearest schools. And
so the schools in the centre of Boston were full,
yeah,
which is where these communities were living.
Yeah.
So they had to then
use the spaces up outside of Boston, yeah.
So obviously you've got lots of children coming via taxi who don't see their parents. Was that the challenges that you were?
Yeah, there was quite a few challenges like that. We sometimes didn't see the parents, although if there was ever issues, we rang up and things like that. But yeah, we didn't always see the parents. Some children, I remember a couple of cases where the children weren't getting home till 4:30 in the evening, and for a 5-year-old, that's quite late. So yeah, there was that challenge.
I guess they have an early start as well.
Yeah.
And was there language issues?
I think for me there was, because I hadn't had any experience really with children with English as additional language, and we had a few children coming into the school who, they couldn't speak English. They hadn't been in schooling. I was teaching late Key Stage 1, early Key Stage 2. So I had children who hadn't been in schooling at all because they perhaps started school at 7, I think it is. And so integrating them into the school and the systems and so on, things like that. And I also hadn't had experience in teaching children with English as an additional language, so that was a big challenge for me and a big learning curve for me of how I could give these children the best that they could. And,
So you was up against it a lot with larger class sizes, children being quite tired, and then having English as their second language there was a lot against.
Yes, I think
the
so.
teaching system deal with.
And I assume that the bigger schools perhaps have more funding. I don't know, but I presume the bigger schools have more funding for.
So when you was in the schools in the centre, did they cope with it better?
They seem to, yeah. There were like interpreters, a lot of their signage with various languages, like welcome signs and like letters translated and things like that, whereas we didn't really have anything like that at all.
Was it just after having your first child or after?
Yeah, first child.
So it was, obviously there's going to be a break, so did you see any changes?
Within the school?
Yeah.
From the first time I went to supply teaching to the second time, I think, I did a lot more longer placements, working at schools for a longer period of time, not in Boston, sort of in towns around Boston. But I did the occasional supply, day-to-day supply within Boston, and I would say there was a few more changes. I think with the language barriers we talked about before, I think schools were better equipped at managing that in that space of time. And I did a couple of day-to-day supply at the school that I worked permanently at, and they seem to have implemented a lot more things into the school, and they worked in partnership with other schools in Boston, which helped with that language barrier and integrated children more because they are on the outskirts. They kind of brought them children in a little bit, which I I think worked quite nicely. And being there on day-to-day supply, seeing some of the children that had talk, it seemed very positive.
Excellent. So the schools were taking positive steps to cope with the changes that Boston was facing.
Yeah, I felt.
So it feels to me from kind of listening to what you're saying that you'd had your baby and you were trying to get that home-life balance right for you and your husband and your child.
Yeah.
You're trying, and that was very difficult.
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it was very hard. And when I did the long-term placements, that was incredibly hard because I think, as for any teacher, I think having that home-life balance is very difficult, and especially when you've got a new baby and finding that balance. You find a new balance anyway, just without throwing in a job, and especially it's a very stressful job, and I found that really, really hard.
So did you have any parenting groups that you could go to in that time?
With my first, I used to go to just the children's centre, and it was my lifeline. It really was my absolute lifeline, and if it wasn't for them, I think the biggest thing, there's two things I went to regularly, well-ish. The first one was I used to go to Baby Peep, and from Baby Peep I had a group of friends, and it was just seeing them and, just talk about my day. I mean, as I said, with my job, I wasn't bringing in much money, and it would literally be me saving up all my money to get a £5 at the end of the week, £5 at the end of the week for Friday afternoon, Friday all day, to spend, to put in petrol, to go to the children's centre, and that was my thing for the week. And all my friends were there, and we used to go for a cup of tea afterwards and a cake sometimes. And it was, and I think I was suffering quite badly at the time of postnatal depression. Did not tell a soul, just really, really suffered on my own, and it was a very isolated time. And so to be at the children's centre was it was my absolute saviour. And then the same for I went to a breastfeeding group as well, which there wasn't many people that turned up. Sometimes it would just be me on my own, sadly. But going there was a big help. It boosted my confidence up with breastfeeding, and him realising that I am making the right choice of things, when around me it felt like other people do completely different things to me. But it was confirmed that I'm doing good. It's fine. So I think that.
So as this one gets bigger, so where did your life go from there?
Well, when he was a year old, I fell pregnant with this one, who's now just over 2, and it was something that the day I found out I was pregnant, the day before I found out I was pregnant, my husband said he wanted to try for another baby, and I said no, because we were still going through the struggles of money and things like that, and I said no, we're not ready. Work was getting hard to balance and things like that, and and then the next day things were twigging in my head. I could be pregnant. Turns out I was, and it was just sheer panic at the time. For me, my husband was quite happy, I think, I hope. But I just panicked because I thought, how are we going to cope with money? Thankfully, everything fell in place, and my husband found a good job. He kept getting promoted and things like that. It was brilliant. And then I went back to work. I was kind of a bit stuck at the time as to what I wanted to do. I didn't want to go back to teaching because I couldn't find the work-life balance. But I was stuck, and I contemplated moving, a place like Scotland and Wales, further south, that sort of thing. But then I found a job that I'm in now, and amazing job, absolutely fantastic job. I work in children's centres and schools. I work with families, it's called Family Learning, and we I work in children's centre schools, work with families, work with the children, giving parents opportunities, and helping with their confidence, I guess. And it's just, I really do love my job at the moment, and I think it's quite rare for someone to truly love their job, and I do love mine. There we go, he's stopped it and started it again. I know that they're putting on a lot of colours, so I think there's a lot of integration within Boston, and I would hope that my children would embrace that, and I would hope that they would accept that's the way society is. Wherever you go, it's not just Boston, it's everywhere. And I would hope that they would integrate that, and I would hope for them that, to me, I feel there's a lot of hatred in Boston from all sorts of people, and I really don't want that to continue. And it scares me that for the children that this could continue. And I would hope that they would just see people for who people are, that, we're all human at the end of the day. And I would hope that they would see that, and I would hope that they would be surrounded by that thought. And
so obviously we've had in the news that Boston's not integrated, it's a dangerous place and all the rest of it. Do you agree with these findings that has been published in national newspapers?
I do, through my job now, I work with a lot of people from Eastern Europe and so on, and I feel that they are integrated. Integrating. I'm in the process of doing it. I know that some of the learners I've been with, they're frustrated because they can't learn English as quick as their children, which children feel so quick. It's amazing. And they want to be integrated. They want to be in, and speak to a lot of my friends, like my friends who are from here. They've got friends from Eastern Europe and so on, and I feel in that sense people are integrating. However, I think there are perhaps a minority, maybe, I don't really know, that just everything is against them. You look on Facebook and you look on the Boston pages, and the things that people are saying, it just shocks me.
I guess when you've got headlines like that and you've got people that are worried, you can sort of understand why they write comments, maybe.
Yeah, I can understand that. That's the generation that are in schools now, where they are, they're all in the same place, they all mix together. Children definitely mix together quite well in schools, I think. And I think that generation, I would hope that they bring up that, we are all much more integrated. I feel that it's perhaps the people that are, of our generation and so on, that they've known Boston where it's it's been a quiet, sleepy town, to all of a sudden it's quite busy with services being stretched and so on, and I think people are feeling pushed out, I suppose. I don't know, and that's why there's that hatred there, whereas the children who are integrated already through schooling, and as they grow older, there's much more harmony.
So by the time your children get older, then Boston will be different again, I guess.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. What I wouldn't like to see is, where there's pockets of communities and they don't move out of that community. They've got their own shops, they've got their own. You're not allowed to come here, whether it's English or whether it's Eastern European, whatever. It doesn't matter. I do like Boston, but it's the same as anywhere. Everywhere's got its faults. Everywhere's got its positives.